What's going on, guys? My name's Kev, and throughout my journey of building with AI vibe coding, I've built multiple AI SaaSes for myself and my clients, and I've built a multi-six-figure AI agency that is growing rapidly, and we just had our best month of $50,000 month in May, and all of this was thanks to the skills that I've been able to develop off of vibe coding. And in this video, if you're a beginner in vibe coding, I got an absolute treat for you, because I'm going to be giving you my 20 best tips that I've discovered along the way of developing all of these different projects to turn you from an AI vibe code beginner to an AI expert developer. And so there's no real need to beat around the bush. I'm just going to hop right into this breakdown, and I'm going to give you every single tip that you could possibly need when building out your SaaS, your AI agency, or building stuff for your clients. So give this video a like, subscribe to the boy, and let's dive right in. All right, guys, so tip number one is your pre-build checklist. Now, there's three main things that you need to make sure that you have prepared before you actually start building. And starting off with this list are the APIs and tools that are needed to actually make your application work. And so let's say in this use case, guys, I was trying to build an application that would run an internet search and find content creation ideas for content creators. Well, we would need the Perplexity tool to actually do that, to do the search. We would need the Replit agent to actually build the app and launch the app on their servers. And we need the Neon database to actually store all of that information. And so that leads us to the second point here of the rough database architecture. Now, in a previous video, we built an entire photo studio app together where it was an AI image model that users can use to, create images of themselves, create images of their products, and all that other fun stuff. And this is the rough database architecture. Now, you just really need to understand how the flow of these tables work. So you have like a users table, a usage table, and a user dashboard. We also have to think about our rough app design, or what the user experience will actually look like, right? And so this is a very generic flow of how an app would work, where the user hits the home page. They have an option to go to the account, which has their settings. They could check their billing, they could check the dashboard, and there should be another sidebar that has their features. And so once again, if this was a content generation app, then one of the features would be where the Perplexity API would live. And so once you guys have an idea of your pre-build checklist, then we can move on to step two. And step two, guys, is simply understanding the database column types, because in the Neon database, there are so many different ways that you can store different pieces of data. And so you need to understand all of these, because then it'll help you actually build out your database architecture. But it's okay if you don't understand this to begin. That's why we're building with Replit, because Replit also builds out the database for you. And we'll talk about that in a later tip. Once you have a decent understanding of the database column types and you can understand how that is going to be stored, we can move on to building our first prompt. Now, with our first prompt, guys, we want to just talk about the tech stack that you're going to be using and the gist of the project. So when I build out my first prompt on Replit, Bolt, Cursor, wherever you guys are building on, I really just let it know about the infrastructure. I want it to lay out how it's actually going to flow versus how the app is actually going to be integrated. And so a first prompt for the Perplexity content generation app would be like, hey, I'm trying to build an app for content creators to generate more content ideas. I want you to build out this web app using Node.js and Express. I want you to build out the Neon database, and I want you to build out the following pages in a preliminary way. And then I would say the pages that I want them to build are like the home, features, pricing, billing, dashboard. And then once all of that's built out, then we can move on from our prompt. The one other thing I want to talk about here, guys, is the difference between mobile development and web app development. So with web app development, what I found has been working the most seamless is the Node.js plus Express tech stack. But for mobile apps, it's completely different, because even if you're developing on your Mac, you need to open up what's called a bundler that can simulate what an iPhone would look like on your screen. Now, these no-code builders like Replit and Cursor and Bolt, they can't natively build that bundler, and so we need this thing called the Expo Go. We have a tutorial coming on the way about mobile app development, and so if you wanted to get a full breakdown of that, that's exactly what we're going to be doing here on the channel shortly. But before we move on to step number 4, guys, I actually want to now dive into what the database would actually look like once you have a little bit more of an understanding of how everything's flowing. I'm just going to open up Replit really quick. And what's loading right now, guys, is my AI AI agency disguised as a SaaS, and we call this agents as a service. And this is what's creating a massive opportunity for not just myself, but everyone in the No Code Academy, because no one in the AI world right now is selling agents the way that we're selling it, because we're dealing with non-technical founders. When we show a client this type of dashboard with the LinkedIn agent that's working, the Instagram agent, the Facebook agent, newsletter, phone call, email, and they're all helping their business grow, it becomes a really big no-brainer for them to actually work with us. And so if we go inside of the database though, guys, this is where we can understand how we've designed the different schemas to store the information correctly. And so in this table here, for example, called Instagram agent leads, we were running an API call to scrape all the people that are interacting with my page because they're warm leads and we can reach out to them. And so what you're seeing here in the columns, right, the timestamp, the username, the full name, the profile URL, the profile picture URL, all of that fun stuff was the response information that came from this API request. And so what that allows us to do is then tell the agent on how to design the database. I didn't even start off technical, right? But once I found out that I can give the chat here on the left-hand side the information about how to build the databases, it was an absolute game changer. And in this video, we're actually gonna build a database table together as well. But I just wanted to show you guys how that works. So the Instagram agent table has its own Instagram agent leads versus the LinkedIn agent leads, which has its own statistics here. And so we can see the most recent statistic run was a LinkedIn agent that is doing LinkedIn connections and sending messages on my behalf. And we can see here that we've accepted now 65 LinkedIn requests, which is generating me passive leads. And so heading back to the presentation here, we can see in step 4, this is probably the most important for actually accelerating your AI understanding. And that's because we can now show you how to get the AI to build database schemas correctly. And so let's create a quick example here. Let's go to make.com and let's open up my LinkedIn outreach agent. So here we have the LinkedIn outreach agent and it's live. You guys can see on the right-hand side here that it's been running successfully for the past couple of weeks. And if we open each one of these up, you can see the response and how it's being stored in the database. We got 65 accepted requests, 278 total requests sent. And so let's say we didn't build out this table for the Phantom agent. What we can do is we can go inside of this parse JSON bundle and we can open up all of these different variables. Now this is very, very important because this is how you can instruct the agent to actually design your table. And so what we're gonna do here, guys, is we're gonna copy this JSON structure. We're gonna head back to the Replit agent and we can tell it to build the exact table structure that we need. And so the table structure that we need is a table that can accept day collection, sent, accepted, process profiles, max invitations, total collection, accepted, status, links connection, JSON link, CSV link. And if it can build out that database for us, then within this automation that's running at set schedules, it'll just automatically store it in the database, which automatically shows the user on the front end, aka the actual user interface, how the agent is performing. And so when we're selling these things for tens of thousands of dollars and we can show it in a really nice UI like this, it becomes a no-brainer for these clients. And so that's how we can create these schemas. And so inside of this chat, we're just gonna go, okay, I want you to create another LinkedIn agent table. I want you to call it LinkedIn agent 2. And the structure of the schema in this table needs to satisfy these fields. And then we're just going to paste in all of those different fields that we got from that JSON response. And so once I click send, what should happen next is this agent literally builds that table in the database. And if that table is correctly built in the database where it says LinkedIn agents 2, then we can build another make automation that stores that agent's performance directly into its own table in the database. And so this is how we're creating these end-to-end functions with legitimate schemas in the database that can store this information without ever having to build the table ourselves. So we're just gonna let this run for a bit. We can see in the chat here, it says, I'll create a new LinkedIn Agent 2 table with the schema structure you provided. Let me start by updating the shared schema and creating the necessary backend components. So it's creating not just the schema, but it's also creating the routes and how it's going to actually store and display this information on the front end. Okay, cool. So in the chat here, it now says, I'm restarting the application to complete the LinkedIn Agent 2 implementation. The database table has been created successfully with the structure that you specified. And it also says that it sent in some sample data. And what I love about the Replit agent is when you do build out a table with the chat, it does add in sample data to make sure that it has understood the objective the way that you wanted it to understand it. And so if it stores the sample data in an incorrect way, then we already know that we still need to prompt it to fix that. Okay, cool. So it says the LinkedIn Agent 2 is now ready to go. So if we go into the database and we click out, we should be able to see LinkedIn Agent 2. There it is. And if we open it up, we can see that it stored all of the test data that we gave it. And we can see that the columns as well are correct. So we have the ID, the timestamp, the day sent, the day accepted, process profiles, so on and so forth. And so let's just say now we wanted to rebuild another LinkedIn outreach agent. So this LinkedIn outreach agent's already working, but we wanted to add another one. We would just build out this exact same automation flow, but this time when we're adding the table in our Postgres step, we would just change the table with the new table that we built. So right now, you guys can see here, it says LinkedIn Agent Leads, but if we click the drop down, we can now select LinkedIn Agent 2 and start submitting data to that table automatically every single day, because this automation at the bottom here runs every single day at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. And so you can then spin up this automation and this LinkedIn agent workflow in multiple different ways for multiple different employees. And so that, in a nutshell, guys, is step number 4 in how to actually get the AI to build database schemas correctly. And so a step from there, guys, would actually be to track the usage from different users. And so let's say we were using the Perplexity content creation API workflow that I was giving you guys as an example earlier in the video. Well, we also need to track the usage that the users are actually using, because we are being charged for the API calls that our users are making. And so we need to see what the costs are as well, and we can then use that to create limitations in the database. So let's move on. So this is like so the last two steps were very, very important. This step is my absolute favorite. And this is what has been shocking a lot of people with the ideas that I'm able to generate, because as you're building, the ideas will come to you. Because especially with like the Replit agent builder, when you write in your first prompt or you try to integrate your first API feature, it's going to start building out that page. And while it's building out that page, it might add some elements to that page that'll spark new ideas. An example I can give you guys is if we go back to the Replit agent stack of all the different AI models and we go into our newsletter agent and we open this up. While it was building out this newsletter page, it started to show us the open rate, the click rate, the unsubscribe rate, and I didn't even know that those were options to show our users on the front end. And so once I found out that that was actually a thing, I looked into the API docs and I was able to see that those are things we can actually source. And so now we can show our users how their growth and their open rate is actually going with their newsletter campaigns. And so that's really exciting, but that idea was genuinely created off of just building. And so this is why I really recommend, if you have an idea, you should just when you're creating step 1 in your pre-build checklist, don't go too over the top with it, because you need to have a little bit of an open mind to actually be okay with pivoting. And so, yeah, that was the example here, actually, the newsletter analytics agent. And so let's move on. All right, guys, so this is another very, very, very important slide. And so the question here is, when should you add make.com automations or N8N agents to your SaaS, and when should you not? And the simplest way to understand this is who you're selling to. If you're going B2B, then I would say you should add your make.com agents to your app, because you can create them as internal tools, meaning you can customize these agents for your B2B clients depending on what their business is. Let's say one of my B2B clients is a e-commerce brand and they wanted a Facebook agent to respond to the people interested in their products. Well, that Facebook agent will work very differently than a Facebook agent for a real estate company trying to get people to buy property. So the automation itself is the same, but the way that we build it for our clients will be very different. Therefore, we have to use make.com or N8N to make that custom experience for our high-ticket B2B clients. But if we're building a B2C SaaS like Social Wolf, then you should not use make.com or N8N agents because you need to build your API calls in a way that everybody can use in the same way. And so, for example, on Social Wolf, the main value of Social Wolf is that it allows all the content creators to upload their content to all social platforms simultaneously. And so that's an API call that works the same for every single one of the users. And so I hope that cleared it up there. And so when I'm building an AI agency for clients, it's the B2B side. If I'm building a SaaS like Social Wolf, it's the B2C side, no agents. Now, next up, guys, is how to actually integrate an API feature into your agents as a service website. Now, before I show you guys exactly how to do this, I want to let you guys know that not all API integrations are the same. They all have their own specific kind of instructions that you need to give your agent to make sure that it understands how to make the API call. Stripe, for example, has a very detailed and very annoying process, and that's why I spent an entire video making a tutorial about that. But guys, for the most part, what I'm about to show you guys is how you can integrate your API into your Replit app. So first, we're going to talk about it, and then we're actually going to go ahead and do it. So this example, again, is going to be using the Perplexity API to make a call to the internet to perform some type of task. And so what we need to do is we need to head to the Perplexity docs so we can get the example of all of the instructions that we can send to our agent, and we can give it that entire website by scraping the HTML in the get text content. Then we can get the example of the post request of the API call and explain what that post request does. And then we can get the get request, which is the data that we would be storing in the database when we get it back. The other thing we can do, guys, is once your API is set up on the front end, then you can build out the database to actually get the response and store it. And this is one of the more difficult integrations of not just getting the API to work, but then getting the API to funnel into a database automatically. And so this is where the community calls in the No Code Academy definitely come in, because once you get that aha moment with integrating one API, you should be able to just do it again and again and again. And so let's quickly show you guys how I would integrate the Perplexity API to this No Code Academy stack. So quickly, I'm going to say, can you add a page to the dashboard side navbar called content research? This page will use the Perplexity API to do a internet search. The goal of this API is to help users come up with more content ideas. And so that's the first part of the prompt. Now we actually have to get the information about the Perplexity docs. And so we're just going to write Perplexity docs. We're going to paste that in and go to the home. And we're going to head over to the API reference. And so now we're going to do step one, which is actually copying the entire website of the API docs, and we're going to copy that. We're going to go back to Replit. We're going to paste that in. And here we can see, guys, it says get text content. That's going to scrape all of the HTML that's on that page so that the agent can understand everything about the docs. And so here we can see it has all of this information now ready to be read and understood. Now, the next thing we want to do is grab the sample API post request. And so that's right here. And so we're just going to copy that. We're going to say, this is the API post request for Perplexity. Paste that in. And then we're going to grab the response, and we're going to grab this, and we're going to head back here. And then we're going to say, this is the get response from the Perplexity API call. Now, the last thing we have to do, guys, is actually get our API key and add it to the application. And so this is a quick little tip as well, but the thing about Replit is that you have a thing called account secrets, which stores all of your API keys from all of the different projects that you've ever done. And so if I already had a Perplexity API key in my account secrets, I can just add it and send it to this app, and it'll already be active. Here we have the Perplexity API key, for example, and we can just click link to this app. And now our app already has the API key. And so if you had to go and find it yourself, you would just go to the dashboard here, you would find the API key and you would paste it in. But now that it has that, we can then finish off this message by saying, I already added the Perplexity API key to the secrets. So let's implement this feature on this new page and I will test the functionality. Now, this is one more tip about prompt engineering, guys. When you have a message that is this long, I always finish off my message by saying, explain your understanding and please implement. Because then when we send this in, we're gonna wait for the first response from the agent right here. And once we get that response, it'll really tell us if it understood the objective. If the response here is not what we wanted, then we would pause the flow here and we would just reprompt it. But we could see here it's already integrating with the Perplexity, so that's really, really good. We just now need to see the text response to see what it actually thinks of this big message we sent in. Okay, cool. So it says, I understand your request perfectly. You want me to create a content research page that uses the Perplexity API to help users generate content ideas for their social media platforms. It also knows which AI model we want to use. So that's the Perplexity Sonar model, because I think their Sonar model has a little bit more reasoning and it can think a little bit more than their base model. And so all of that so far seems pretty good. And it also sees that we have the Perplexity API key. And so let's say though, we created this prompt and then the understanding here was wrong. You would completely stop the flow and you would prompt it one more time. And once it tells you the understanding correctly, then you let it go. It doesn't mean it'll get it done in one shot, but the chances of it doing it in one shot are much, much higher in that case. All right, guys, so we just got the update back. Now this is the first time that we're testing this. So we're gonna see if it's a one prompt. If it doesn't work, it's actually something that we can use in a different tips, which is how to debug. So we'll come back to it if it doesn't work, but we can see in the side nav bar now, we have the content tools. And if we open it up, we actually have the fully built content research page. And so here we have the niche as optional, and I'm going to fill this out as if I was a real user using this tool. And so if the niche was AI no code, I want to find the biggest trends in the vibe coding world and maybe find me the 5 most viral videos of the week in the AI no code niche. I'm gonna click search ideas. And okay, we got an error. So we're gonna come back to this because that's another tip in terms of how to debug API integrations or any integration in general. So let's head back to the presentation here, guys, and we're gonna move on to our next slide. And this slide here, guys, is when you're done building your integration and let's say like we finished out building the content research page and it's all working. Now we want to make it look good before we send it out to the world. And that's where we can use this hack called 21st Dev. Now, before we open up the page, let me just explain what it does. So 21st Dev is a free library of the most popular user submitted elements or components. So these could be like 3D moving components. It could be like a ChatGPT chatbot section that you can copy. It could be some nice card overlays, animation overlays. Long story short here, guys, is that 21st Dev will help you finalize and create really nice looking UIs really, really quick. And so I'm just going to show you exactly how that works really quick. And okay, so we're going to click browse components. And let's say, what are we looking for here? Let's say we were looking for a statistics animation or component. And so here, if we just write stats, we paste that in. We have all of these different stats options to choose from. And so I like this like incident report here, for example. It shows like, you know, critical incidents, total incidents. So what this could be for like the LinkedIn agent, for example, it could be like connection requests sent to connection requests accepted. And then this dashboard can show the daily growth and the projection into the future. And this ties into tip number 5, where you get ideas as you're building. And so by seeing a UI element can also be giving you these ideas. And so if we go in the top right-hand corner, you guys can't see this, but in the top right-hand corner of your page here, it says copy prompt. And you can literally just choose which AI model that you're using to build your app on, and it'll create a specialized prompt for that AI engine. And so let's say it was Replit, we go like that, boom, copy prompt, and now we have the entire prompt. And so we could literally head back to our content research page here, and we can say, okay, I now want you to add this. Actually, you know what? Let's not do this element. Let's do a cool chatbot element for the Perplexity. So we'll go into chat. We'll find the one that we like the most. Let's see this AI input one. And yeah, so this AI input one literally is the ChatGPT card. So it literally looks like you have OpenAI on your website. So let's say we want the chatbot on our site to look like this. So we'll copy the prompt and we'll head back over to Replit and we'll say, okay, now I want you to redesign the content research page with this component as the chat box instead. The AI model in the chatbot will be automatically set to the Perplexity Sonar model. And then we're just gonna click paste, and that'll paste in the entire information about the actual code to implement the component, and we'll click send. So while that's cooking, let me just show you some other cool elements that I always use on 21st Dev because they're just the greatest. So like there's a dark mode button that is just so fun to implement because the button animation is really cool. So if we type in dark mode, yeah, like this button here has a nice little animation. There's a bunch of them though, so you can just play around and see which one you like the most. But basically, yeah, so that's one. The other one that I really like is border animations. So if we go into border, we can see here, like we can add borders around buttons to make them look cooler. All right, guys, so the agent is still working, as you can see on the left-hand side, but it already has implemented that, that element that we wanted to. And so it already looks great. We can choose trending. We can choose the different sonar models. So that looks good. We'll come back to this obviously to show you guys how to debug, but let's go back into our presentation here and see what's next in the hacks to actually, here we are. So how to actually debug errors fast. And so there's so many ways that we can instruct the AI model on how to find the actual error that is causing the implementation of our API or our feature or our database to actually be solved. And so the first one, guys, is actually to check the API developer portals of the feature that you're integrating. Because let's say the actual API calls were working, then you can identify that the error is occurring on Replit. And so, for example, if we're integrating the Perplexity API, and so I'm opening up usage metrics, and we can see that today is June 4th, and we haven't made any calls yet. And so we know that the API call has not been integrated yet with our app. But once it does, we can see A, how much the API calls are costing, and B, like if it's working or not. And this will help us debug it. So that's one of the ways we can debug it. Now, the other way we can debug, guys, console inside of Replit. So let's open up the content research tool. Let's send in a simple message. So trending videos in the no-code AI niche this week only. And we'll click send. And beautiful. So here we have the error that says search error unexpected token. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to first go into the console. And in the console, we can see that there's some type of response. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy this in here. And we're going to say, okay, that looks great. The chat box looks much better. But when I tried sending a message to the Perplexity API, I got a unexpected token doc type error. This needs to be fixed. And this is the response in the console. And we're going to paste that in. Now, the response in the console is actually not that detailed right now. And so the way that we can have our AI model actually find where the error is occurring is by adding something called logs. And what logs are is basically ways to create more information in the console about different calls that are happening. And so what's happening here, guys, these calls are actually taking place. So it's doing a get call, it's doing a get call for the activities, it's doing a get call for the LinkedIn agent leads, it's doing a post call for the content research. And so the one that we want to see more logs about is the post call for the content research. And so we can now say, add more logs to the content research post API call so we can debug this error better. And then last thing we're gonna do, guys, is this little toolbox here called the dev tools. If we open that up, we can see a little bit more information about the error that's happening. And so we can actually, like copy this in. And so looking at the logs though, the API call is not even happening. So it's only including the LinkedIn agent stuff as well. And so we can say, when I looked in the dev tools after we got this error, there was no information about the Perplexity API call. And so we can simply just send in that message and see what happens when the AI reads this message, and we want to see what its response is right now to see if it understands what's going on. So here it says, I need to fix the Perplexity API implementation. The doc type error suggests the API is returning HTML instead of JSON, likely due to an authentication or request format issue. And that is the exact issue that's happening. And so if we still, after this update, have the issue again, you just need to keep prompt engineering and staying patient. And this leads us to a much later on tip, which is vibe coding is not vibes. It's something else, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And so here, guys, is a really nice message because it says, I'm now testing the content research chatbot, but with enhanced logging. And so what that means is next time we try to do it and it fails, we should at least see more information in our console when we try and do that post request. It says it fixed the chatbot. Let's see if our debugging has actually worked out. And if it doesn't, like the actual workflow I showed you guys is the workflow you guys should be doing when you're trying to debug. That doesn't mean the agent will one-shot it, but it gives the best chance for the agent to one-shot it. All right, guys, so after genuinely 20 minutes of debugging, because this is like a full stack app and this thing has been, talking for a while, we figured it out, okay? So it's working now. And so we can go into the chat interface and we can say like, tell me the trends, for YouTube no code creators this week. And then we'll send this in. Now this chat box looks like shit. Obviously we had to redesign it. It was not working. All right. And so we really had to keep trying again and again, but that's essentially what has to happen. Right. And so now that we have this working, we can obviously reformat it to make it work better and store it in the database and all that fun stuff. But to sum it up, that is how we debug. Right. So I consistently looked at the logs in the console, in the dev tools, and I just consistently tried to use that to prompt the agent. And then I also continuously gave it the different API request examples. I gave it the curl example. I gave it the JavaScript example. And then eventually after, trial and error, it was able to implement it for us. And so let's move on to our next tip. So guys, number 10 was something I wish I knew 6 months ago, which is securing your app from hackers. And guys, hackers are everywhere, and even AI hackers now exist. And this is the protocol that you should be using to ensure your app is safe before you actually deploy it to production. And so let's say you're ready to go, you've made it look nice, you've used all the integrations, the flows, the stripes, everything that you wanted. Now we need to talk about API rate limiting, because let's say you wanted to create a free option or a trial tier or something like that, and they're going to use something like that Perplexity model. And after your testing on the back end, you're able to do some calculations and see how much everything costs. And you see that, oh, okay, I can charge people, X amount of money for this amount of requests and so on and so forth. Well, then you guys need to actually tell the agent to set these API rate limits so that no one abuses your account. And so this could be limiting the amount of people that can sign up in an hour, call the API requests in an hour, and the different code vulnerabilities as well, which leads us to point number 2. When you have your entire code base, it's been slammed together by an AI model. And so we obviously should run it through some vulnerability checks. And what better than another AI model? And so that's where we use CodeRabbit AI. It's a brand new tool, and it's absolutely incredible once you guys are done your MVP, because it'll do an entire deep dive into your code base. It'll find all the vulnerabilities for hackers. It'll find the vulnerabilities for people's data getting leaked as well, and it'll help you patch all of that stuff up before it gets shipped out to the world. Now, last but not least, guys, is actually submitting your app to the no-code team in Kev's No-Code Academy, where we can review your entire code structure, how the app actually flows, how everything's working. We'll give you constructive criticism and what we think about your app moving forward. We can also discuss your marketing plan and stuff like that, and you can then ship it off to the App Store or onto the web. Let's move on to number 11. Now, number 11, guys, is deploying your app to the world and what servers to actually launch the app on. And there's actually some server limitations. And so for Replit, for example, the real big limitation is the upload limits that you can do on their servers. And so if you were building an application like Social Wolf where users needed to upload files that were bigger than 200 megabytes very consistently, then Replit would not be the best place to deploy your app. Now, you can still build your app on Replit, but if that was limiting your app's use, then you would have to then deploy it on Vercel or AWS. And we can obviously show you guys how that works. But other than that, guys, Replit does have an amazing server, and you guys just have to understand all of these different setup tools like the autoscale, the scheduled, the static, the build CMD, the ports, the secrets, and where all of these secrets are going to be stored, the machine power, and all that fun stuff. All right, guys, so let's talk about prompting. Now, we're not going to go back into the Replit agent for this. We're just going to talk about different scenarios and how it would actually prompt the agent. And so let's say I was working on an integration like the Perplexity chatbot, and the Perplexity chatbot then worked and it's working well. Now we want to tell the agent to switch its task and make sure it actually can change its like what it's working on. And so I always instruct it with a beginning phrase like, okay, great, or okay, that looks amazing, or like, oh my God, like the chatbot works and it's integrated. Now I want you to blah, blah, blah. And that'll help it completely switch tasks in the next thing that you want to work on. Now, you guys saw the second point here, but when you're adding an integration like an API or building a database schema or adding an API's response to the database or something like that, that's pretty complex for the agents to actually complete, I always finish off the message with, tell me your understanding and please implement it. Because when you see that message response before it starts building, it'll really tell you if it has that understanding or not. And if it doesn't, then like I said, we can just pause the flow and send in a new chat to see if it understands it better. And that's going to help evolve your prompt engineering as well. And so if things are breaking relatively consistently and things aren't one prompting and being built out immediately, you don't necessarily have to blame the AI models. Sometimes they can just be terrible, but you should just understand that you just need to skill up your prompt engineering skills, and that just comes with repetition. Now, this leads us into a really, really powerful point here, guys, and that's the agent's memory and how it actually slows down its workflows when its memory gets too long. And so in the No Code Academy agent stack here, for example, this chat has been ever since we started the build. And so it is super, super long and super old. And so another reason why potentially it took us a while to integrate the Perplexity chatbot is because the agent has just used up all of its memory. And so now that this is actually integrated, I can click new chat. Now, before I click new chat though, there's one thing that you lose, which is the ability to roll back. So let's say you actually made a mistake that is too far gone to fix and you needed to roll back to any moment in the build. Well, you can do that in the message history. And so I can literally roll back all the way to 12 days ago if I'd like to. Now, when I click the new chat though, all of those opportunities go away. But there is another way to actually get the rollbacks in a safer way, and that is by pushing your code to GitHub. And so another beautiful integration about Replit is that it has a GitHub tab directly integrated where you can just add or build a repository on GitHub and push your code directly to it. And so let's say this was a nice checkpoint for this application, and I was ready to A, save the project, and B, make a new chat. I would then go to my GitHub, I would push this code, and I would confirm that I want to push the code to GitHub, and it will send all of the new updates in our code base on the left-hand side to our GitHub repository as a safe zone. So even if we fuck up everything on here for here on out, we can actually build brand new on a brand new development server with that code base, and it'll start off right here. Now that we've done that, we could just click new chat, and this agent here will be moving a lot faster. And so sometimes it's as simple as just refreshing the memory of the chat. This is something I have to be reminded of constantly, guys, and I bet you do too, but that's patience. I mean, whoever thought of coming up with the term vibe coding clearly has no idea what it's like to build a full stack app, because it's not vibes, all right? And we'll get to that a bit later, but it's absolutely not vibes, and it's patience. It's patience coding, and you need to just read the agent's thought process and how it's actually building things out to actually see like where the errors are, and that pattern recognition will help you speed up your builds over time as well. Lastly, guys, I love sending the Replit agent screenshots. So even if it's not a UI problem and it's like a massive console error text or it's something in the database that looks incorrect, I'll also take a screenshot of that. And so like, let's say like, for example, when we were testing this and we kept getting that red message of the JSON error, I would literally just quickly go like this, boom, take a screenshot of it, drag it over to the chat. And so we can see exactly like what we're seeing, because at that moment in time, we weren't getting any of those errors in the console. And so that was the only place we can show it where the error was coming from. All right, guys, this is the question that stumps a lot of people in my academy when they come in for an onboarding call or when we go through coaching sessions. And that is building your app with a marketer lens on. So before you build, or while you're building, or even if you've built it, what in one sentence is this app doing and who is it for? And if you can answer that in a very clean and concise way, it'll create supreme clarity on how your marketing will actually go. So again, I can give you a Social Wolf example. I can give you an AI agent example. So Social Wolf, the marketing lens that I had on, and the sentence is, it's an app for content creators to post everywhere at once. Very simple. We have the exact demographic that we're reaching out to and the exact main feature. Now, in terms of AI agents, the sentence there is, we work with any business and we fix their biggest problems with AI agents. And so that could be in any industry. And I've shown you guys how we do that with our most valuable agent offers. And so when you have this marketer lens on though, it's going to create clarity, because some people, when they came into the academy, for example, they would just be like explaining everything that they wanted the app to do, but not anything about who the app's for or why they would be interested. And so thinking in reverse here is very important. And this leads us to another section of reverse engineering, which is learning from your competitors. So again, I'll give you a Social Wolf example. When I was first trying to build out Social Wolf, I studied the competitors to see A, what features are they using? B, what price points are they using? C, what is their marketing? And that allowed me to see so many different things. And the main point I wrote here was, let's say there was a feature from a competitor that I didn't know how they did it. Well, now I can take that feature, I can bring it to chat, and I can be like, yo, do you know this feature about my competitor? How do you think they did it? And if you know how they did it, can you give me the tech stack and can you break down how they did it so I can implement it myself? And that's how I reversed engineered how I found how to build Social Wolf and essentially have all of the features of my competitors at a cheaper price point. So you can do that too. And all you would have to do is just understand that if the competitor built that feature, so can you. You got to figure out how. Now, this is especially important for beginners, guys, which is ask more questions than you think you should. So let's say this was the first time you implemented something like the Perplexity chat and you kept seeing that JSON error that we got as the unexpected token error. You need to then understand why that error actually was happening and how it actually got fixed. And this isn't because you need to manually one day write with code and fix it. It's because you need to be able to express this to your clients. You need to be coming from a perspective of an AI agency developer expert, and you need to explain at least what's happening to these people. And so if you then got through the error and through the debugging that I showed you how to do, and it was able to make it work, and you still can't tell me how it worked, then you need to go to chat, you need to go to Gemini, you need to go to Claude, and you need to have a conversation with that AI to have until you actually can explain to me how the fix was made. And this way, guys, the next time that you run into that same error, you're just gonna plow right through it. So guys, I mean, I've had a big ego in the past, and if you have a big ego as well, this is for you. You need to know when to roll back the code to a previous checkpoint. Sometimes you think the way that a feature can be implemented is just not the way it actually is in reality. And if you're stuck looping on an implementation and the AI agent is still not fixing it with the error debugging that I showed you guys how to do, it's likely that you have something confused in how you want this thing to work versus the reality of how it's going to work, which is actually going to hurt the performance of the output. And so what you need to do in this use case, if this ever happens to you, and it's happened to me a billion times where I was like, no, I can fix this. No, I'm going to try again. I can fit. No. No. Give me one more shot. And I reached a point where I was like losing my mind because I was like, it's still not working after 4 hours. And this is where having a community like the Academy or having someone like my dad who's a full stack developer, you can ask questions and be like, okay, what is wrong with my prompting? What is wrong with my understanding of this implementation? And sometimes you just need to suck it up and roll back to a previous checkpoint. And it may feel like, you've lost all of that progression and all of that, growth in your production of your app or your development of your app. And the reality is sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. And so you have to, okay? You have to. It sucks, but you have to, okay? Especially if you're a beginner. Now, this is a huge one, guys. Absolutely huge. Like the way that we've been evolving the Academy is to allow you guys to just use the Academy to your advantage. So you have myself, but you also have developers on my team. You also have a network of other people in there that are joining the community calls. You have access to our courses. You have access to our blueprints. You have access to step-by-step, handheld support and coaching as well if you'd like, so you can skill up faster. And so using this to your advantage means going all out on your prompt engineering, going all out on trying to actually build, running into as many errors as you humanly can, and then sending these errors to us in community calls, in coaching calls, so we can actually break down how that error is solved so that the next time you run into it, you're able to fix it. And this is definitely what's helping people move at rapid speeds right now. Everything you've seen previously is the more logistics about being a successful vibe coder, right? Vibe coder. But this is the reality, is that vibe coding is not vibes. It's patience. And it's a massive learning curve that everyone's up against. And so taking this understanding, this point number 20 of vibe coding is not vibes, it's patience. And knowing that you're playing the long game, even though around us, it seems that everything's moving so rapidly. The only way that I'm getting ahead is that I'm just consistently studying. And I actually made a video where I explained the way that I use AI to teach me at light speed. And if you want to check that video out, it's down below. Honestly, guys, if you do want to build out your SaaS or your AI agency stack like you saw in this video, these tips should be your accelerator to getting there. Just stay patient, keep the vibes rolling. See you guys in the next one.